Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. So the new weekend numbers are hot off the presses here. They dropped about an hour ago. It is 11 a.m. Central Time. So we're going to talk about the top 10 for this weekend of October 27th through the 29th. Not a ton of surprises, but a big surprise at the top, I think. And it's not who won, but it's how little it actually made. So coming in at number one this weekend was Jigsaw. And again, these are estimates. Actuals will come out Monday afternoon. These are about 90% correct. Number one this weekend was Jigsaw with 16.2 million on or in about 3,000 screens. Its per theater average was just about $5,500. So it is no surprise that Jigsaw won the weekend. It is a surprise about how poorly it did. Now, it wasn't a surprise to me. If you listen to this show, I do a weekend preview show, and I can't remember the exact number I put up there, but I think I said 15.5, 15.4, or about 15, which was significantly lower than everybody else from the industry, like Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Box Office Pro, all those people. They were all saying, high teens, definitely. Deadline was saying into the 20s, low 20s. The industry itself, who tends to be conservative, I believe was saying low 20s, right? So they were all wrong. I wasn't necessarily 100% right. I went a little bit lower than the 16.2, but keep in mind, these are estimates. I get the feeling this could drop off even more. When a movie tends to underperform, the industry tends to overestimate their Sunday take. Medea is another example of that. Last weekend on the show, the last weekend review show, I talked about Boo 2 coming in at whatever it came in, 20 something, right? And I was like, I think that's probably a little bit high to the actual. And I was right. It was about 500K off. I get the feeling that Jigsaw, when the actuals come in tomorrow afternoon, might be down into the 15 million range. So I think they might have smudged it a bit for the Sunday estimates here. In any event, so Jigsaw does 16.2. Now, if we compare that to the rest of the Saw series, which I walked through earlier in this week's show, not good at all, right? So it's the lowest opening outside of Saw 6, which came out in October 2009. And it's just slightly below the original Saw, which came out in 2004, and that only did 18 million. And so this performance is just, it's not great. I wouldn't necessarily call it a flop, but it's gonna barely break even. Deadline is saying that the insider sources that they have, who knows, because Deadline is so close to the industry now that it's like you can't believe sometimes the stuff that they say because it's directly from somebody at the company. So they're going to spin it all day long and say, oh no, it's going to be fine, everything's great. But that insider source is saying that even at this $16 million number, that Jigsaw will be profitable. I find that a little bit hard to believe, just because I think the marketing campaign had to be in excess of 30, 40, maybe 50 million bucks. In any event, this I think this is the final nail in the Saw coffin, at least for right now. From 2004 until 2010, we had a Saw movie every Halloween weekend, essentially. It's so weird that it's already Halloween weekend, by the way. It's going to be November by Wednesday. Think about that. So Saw has always owned this period of the box office, sort of this weekend, essentially. And then, because of diminishing returns and less profit and a worse ROI, by the time 2010 rolls around, it's like, okay, it's trying to put this thing to bed for a while. And it's been, I guess, 7 years. God, that feels so like 2010 was 7 years ago. And they finally decided to bring it back. And I think they hedged their bets dramatically, to be honest with you. Like, if they're only spending 10K or 10 million on the production budget, probably giving it a decent marketing campaign. But But, you know, I don't think they expect this thing to make like $100 million. Like, there's no way. I think in their most idealistic sort of dream about how this movie could do, it opens at 30. Maybe comes in at like 80 million would be the absolute top of this could do for them. The fact that it opened at 16 and probably will let's kind of figure out where it's going to go. So it's at 16.2 now. I think it's probably going to come in at about 15.8 when the actuals come in tomorrow, but I'm going to use 16.2. There's no way it does a 3x multiplier. Just there's no way. Like, it's Halloween's on Tuesday, right? Like, who's going to go see this movie next weekend when it's, you know, basically the holiday season already? So, and then Thor's coming out as well. So I don't know. I just don't see it having a great multiplier at all. It's also a horror film. Horror films in general do not have good multipliers. So there's no way it gets to 3x. Let's just assume maybe like a worse 2.5. So you're looking at 40.5 million. I think it's going to struggle to get to 40 million. And it'll probably, I think, leg it out there to 40 million bucks. That's not great. That would be above. Oh wow, that's interesting. Now that I'm looking at it, that would be below Saw 3D, but above Saw 6. Is that right? Saw 6. Yeah, 2009. Which only opened at 14, ended at 27. I think I talked about this the last episode, but look at that multiplier, right? So Saw 6 had a plenty of time, opened on October 23rd, so it had a full week to sort of soak up that Halloween audience, but it only ended up 27. Multiplier on that was 1.92. So there is a possibility, let's say that this new Jigsaw does 2x, 32 million bucks. So I'm saying probably high 30s, maybe low 40s total take for this overall. Not a disaster, but basically signals to Lionsgate that this sort of experiment of bringing back Saw was probably not super successful, and that they're not going to repeat it, essentially. So I think this is probably, for all intents and purposes, the end of the Jigsaw Saw universe for right now. But you never really know, right? I mean, Freddy comes back every so often. Friday the 13th comes back. Amityville Horror comes back. So I think it will come back into the fold. Maybe probably not the next couple of years, but I think 4 to 5 years out, there's probably going to be another Saw movie. Just a kind of a word on audience reactions and who went to go see this. Deadline has some really good numbers about demographics in terms of, you know, who went to go see it Friday night. Friday night turnout was 57% men for Jigsaw, 43% females. So skewed definitely towards the men. 60% was over 25. That seems a little bit high to me, higher than I thought it was going to be. The people under 25 and under 18, how are people under 18 going to see this, by the way? Isn't the rated R cutoff 17 years old? I mean, what a weird demo. Hey, a 1 year demo, essentially. Under 25 and under 18 both gave the horror film a B+ on Cinema Score. Overall, it scored a B on Cinema Score, which is not bad at all for a horror film. Horror film cinema scores tend to be lower. I'm not sure why. That's just the pattern that has been around for the last, I don't know, 20 years or something. Horror films just don't score very high. Even if people really like it, they're probably going to give it like a B+, B. So B's not too bad at all. But younger people seem to like it a little bit more than the older crowd. Thursday night, which is the preview night, was even a little bit more skewed towards men. Under 25 women and older males love Jigsaw the most, giving it 76 and 70% overall positive score, and that's from the ComScore Screen Engine's post-track system, which is a whole nother surveying system, which I don't have access to because I think it costs a lot of money, although I might get access to it because I don't know, I'm so fascinated by this stuff. I just would love to know that data. So women under 25 and males over older males gave it the best scores. It is interesting that it skewed a little bit older than I thought it was going to. I think Happy Death Day really took out that youth audience, right? Like Happy Death Day was just, for whatever reason, it was a college student. It was the main character, skewed younger, kind of had a hip premise to it, felt hip, felt cool. And I said, as a 35-year-old man, like, what the hell do I? But you can just tell if something has a hip vibe to it and that young people are going to be attracted to it. And they were. And they went to see that out in droves. And I can't remember the breakdown of that over an under 25-year-old demo, but it definitely skewed a lot younger than this. And so that might have been one of the reasons why it didn't break out, right? Like 16 million is not terrible, but the expectation was low 20s. And I was one of the few people to say that it wasn't going to get there. I thought it was going to do about 15. It might end up doing 15 when actuals come in. I didn't hear anybody else say that, to be honest with you. And not to toot my own horn, but the reason that I said that was that Happy Death Day did so well with that youth audience that's the movie they're going to see for the Halloween. That and Boo 2. Jigsaw just was kind of an afterthought. And obviously the Saw series has been away for 7 years. Do you think, someone who's 20 years old, kind of remembers or has nostalgia for the Saw series? No, I don't think so. Like, I think people who are a little bit older, like my age, if they were super into it, might have a little bit of nostalgia for it and wanted to go see Jigsaw and be like, oh, cool, another Saw movie. But younger people just did not show up the way they needed them to, which is why it did, why it underperformed. It definitely didn't quote unquote flop, but it severely underperformed the expectations. Another word about that. So cinema score was B for Jigsaw. One thing I also wanted to note, Rotten Tomatoes score for Jigsaw was 39%. Which is like, okay, like it's a horror film, it's a Saw film, it's not going to do well with critics. That's not that crazy. Again, though, and I talked about this last week with Boo 2, only 36 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes for Jigsaw. I find that strange. Again, Boo 2 only had 12 reviews when it was released. There has to be something going on that I'm not aware of in the background here, like, why are publications not reviewing these movies? I always thought it, growing up, I always thought the assumption was that, like, hey, the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all the big papers will review basically every major wide release that comes out. That was the expectation that had been set down by journalism, I don't know, for forever, I think. Now we're getting to a place where they're just not reviewing Jigsaw and movies like Boo 2. I don't know if there's like a fight going on. Both are Lionsgate. Both are from Lionsgate. So there might be a conflict there. Lionsgate may be saying, hey, we're not going to screen this for critics. My guess is, and I remember this happening, I can't remember what movie it was, but this is probably like 10 years ago, because a studio refused to screen it for critics beforehand, they said, we're not going to see it. We're not going to review it. And I think Lionsgate makes that bet and says, well, I don't think they want the critics to see it. They didn't want them to see Boo 2 because they gave it a 7% in Rotten Tomatoes, which is just like, and I haven't seen the film, but I've seen reactions from some people that I trust their opinion. Look no farther than like Double Toasted's review of it, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels. They rip it to shreds, and they liked the first one. I didn't like the first one. I thought the first one was terrible, but they just absolutely ripped to shreds. What we're seeing here, if I take a little bit of a step back, is like there is not necessarily a war, but there's a quality issue here, right? Boo 2 does not meet the standard quality of a wide release film. It just doesn't. And Lionsgate, I think, knew that and said, you know what? We don't need the critics at all. This is going to make money based on our fans who don't care what the critics say. And I think the Lionsgate made the same bet with Jigsaw. And I think with Jigsaw, it may have paid off a bit. Maybe. With Boo 2, I think it kind of backfired. Looking at Jigsaw, it did a 39% Rotten Tomatoes. Here's what I don't understand. And this actually goes back to the conversation I had last week about Boo 2 as well. We have a cinema score, which is a survey about how well a film does, right? We also have surveys from ComScore called Post Track. I don't have access to that, right? But sometimes Deadline posts it. What I do have access to is the Rotten Tomatoes audience score. right? Which I think is, to me, is my favorite way of judging how well a film's doing. I know those things can be manipulated, but I feel like it is the most open and democratic way of judging how an audience is reacting to a film. So the audience score was a 92% for Jigsaw. 92%. Average rating was 4.7 out of 5. Something is amiss, right? Something does not add up here. Cinema score of B does not get you a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. So is the cinema score skewed, or is the Rotten Tomatoes score skewed? I get the feeling that, and I'm looking at the post-track data that Deadline has, and that's kind of in the 70s, like 72, 76. Something just doesn't feel right about this audience score Rotten Tomatoes. It seems very, very, very skewed high, in a weird way. I'm calling bullshit on it. Like, I feel like I love how you just said, oh, I trust it the most, but like, there's something off about that. A 92% on Rotten, it just doesn't add up. Now let's see if I have any other data that I can look at for Jigsaw. 40% on Metacritic from critics, which kind of, falls right in line with that 39% on Rotten Tomatoes. So this makes me a little bit leery about using Rotten Tomatoes as the audience score as a way to judge a film. User score on Metacritic is 6.2, so 62%. God, I wish I had more data on this. I might just go ahead and splurge for the post track just to get that information because it's so fascinating. It doesn't make any sense how I got 92% Rotten Tomatoes. I might be calling shenanigans. Like, is Lionsgate like paying people to post to give it a 92%? Like, that's one option. I mean, look at, not to bring in politics, but look what Russia did with our social media system in this country. Like, they used the openness of it and the lack of transparency in a way, ironically, to manipulate people and manipulate perception about what reality was, right? What was actually happening. And I don't know, like, I sound like I'm like Tom DeLonge on Joe Rogan's podcast this week, but I don't know. Something seems weird about that number, that 92%. It's way, way, way too high. Like, if it was in like the low 80s, I'd be like, no, that seems kind of like kind of right. Maybe a little high. 70s seems about right. High 70s, low 80s. 92 does not make any sense. But enough about that. I get obsessed about stupid things. Let's move on. So overall, Jigsaw did okay. Definitely underperformed expectation. Closer to my sort of my prediction than the industry was. We'll see how it drops next weekend. Halloween's essentially over now this weekend. So I expect, I'm going to say about a 61% drop next weekend, which isn't, it's a horror film. So anything below 65%, I think, is a victory for this one, in terms of a drop. Okay. So that's number one, Jigsaw, 16.2 million. Number two this weekend was Tyler Perry's Boo 2 Madea Halloween. 10 million flat, a 53% drop, still in 2,400 theaters. That drop's okay, by the way. 53% is a little bit, I think actually a lot lower than I thought it was going to do in terms of a drop. Per theater average was just about $4,200. Total take so far is 35 million. So, this one is playing a little bit better in the second weekend than I thought it was going to do. But again, one of the points that I try to bring up pretty often is opening weekend is so important because everything will be a reaction to opening weekend. So the fact that I'm talking about a 55% drop or a 50% drop doesn't really mean that much if the opening weekend was $10 million off of what it should have been, if that makes sense. It's sort of like dropping a pebble into a pond. Like, those ripples will play out and they'll get smaller and smaller and smaller, but they all start from that initial ripple, right? That initial drop of the stone. That's opening weekend. How big of a stone is essentially how big the opening weekend is, right? And so, Tyler Perry should have made a huge splash opening weekend, and it made kind of a tinier splash than we thought. Its opening weekend did 21.2 Oh, that's interesting because I thought it was higher than that. I think I said like 26 earlier in the show. No, it was low. It's 21.2. That's actually not great at all. And 10 million this weekend, is okay in terms of the drop, but like it's gonna play out pretty far below what the original did. And that's not a surprise. There's a lot of quality problems here. I think I talked about the Rotten Tomato score was 7% from critics. Audiences gave it a 47%. That is a drop since last weekend. I think it was in the 50s last weekend. Critics hated it. They didn't even go to see it. Only 15 reviews. Audience score has been dropping precipitously over the last week. And the reaction that I've heard from people has just been super, super negative. So I thought the drop was going to be higher than this, but I think it's going to get that. It's getting the Halloween boost, I think. It's not going to get that next weekend. I expect a pretty severe drop next weekend, at least 55%. I'm thinking more like a 60% drop. And that will leave, I mean, if you look at all of the Madea movies, I got to go through them by the date here because I don't want to get them screwed up. So a Madea Halloween Boo did 73 last year. That's not going to happen this year. That's not even come close to that. It's going to struggle to make it to 60. I think it's more like probably 55, maybe even lower. I'm just going to have a terrible, terrible multiplier because Halloween's over. Now that will put it kind of near a Madea Christmas, Madea Witness Protection, Medea's Big Happy Family. It'll be in that range and zone. So it's not like a just total mess for them. It's just sort of like, I guess I would be frustrated with as Lionsgate when you basically say, hey, Tyler Perry, you did a great job last year. Come back and do it again. We'll give you our full marketing support and really push the film out there. And then he delivers a product that is objectively not good. Not even good in terms of like the basic production methods that he's using. Double Toasted went on about how they thought it was so poorly shot that they think it's like a huge like money laundering scheme for Tyler Perry to pocket 20 of the 25 million for the production budget, which you never know. It looks poorly for him. It just does not make him look like a great professional here. Tyler Perry is a great actor. He's built a whole business and brand around himself, and it's not like this is going to hurt him that much. I think it'll hurt him a lot more inside the industry than outside the industry, just because they gave him, it's like essentially giving somebody all the resources they need to make a film, all the sort of marketing support, and then they delivered this absolute turkey of a film. Like, it's just like, you're not going to get a lot of chances like that again. And the fact that this film is not really delivering the way that I thought it would, and it's mostly because Tyler Perry didn't really shoot a great movie, that's going to hurt him. It's going to hurt his career a bit. Audiences, I think, don't care. They never really took his movies that seriously. But if someone's going to spend, tens of millions of dollars to market your film, it better fucking be good. And it better be high quality, and it better get people into the seats. And if it's not, then okay, good luck finding another movie to do. So, that's sort of my quick hot take on it. I don't know if I'm completely full of shit or not, but if I was Lionsgate, I would be pissed off. Like, because Boo 2 easily should have opened to 25-30 million bucks opening weekend. Like, after that goodwill of the original film, everybody had a good time watching the original. And it falls short mostly because the film was not shot on a professional level. The reactions I heard were that a lot of it is just embarrassing how poorly it was shot, and the CGI is awful. So he's, I don't know, I don't know what's going through his head. He should stick to acting. I think he's a great actor. Okay, enough about Tyler Perry. Let's see. Number 3 this week was Geostorm, 5.675 million, a nasty 58, almost 59% drop. It is in about 3,300 theaters. Per theater average was $1,700. Total take so far was 23 million. Not a ton to say about Geostorm, except for the fact that it's probably the biggest flop of the fall. Losses will exceed 100 million. I called that out even before the Deadline article dropped, saying it was going to lose over 100 million. I thought that based on my like basic profit and losses math with movies, there's no way they can even it out, that it's less than I'm gonna say it's gonna be well over $100 million loss. Like maybe they can pull some of the back end marketing stuff for VOD and streaming and reduce those costs in some way and don't really push the film at all. It's a tough call though, because you feel like you can make some money off VOD and streaming, so you kind of want to push it, but like the losses are just so massive here from the start that I don't even know if it would be worth it. And with a 59% drop here in the domestic market and its second weekend, it's almost like they didn't even release the film at all. It's like they made this $120 million plus $15 million for reshoots, so 135 at least. It's almost like it didn't ever get released. I mean, it's just like, it's that massive of a loss here. Not incredibly surprising that it did so poorly. I kind of felt like it was going to pop off a bit just because it seemed really fun and stupid and like a mid-90s action film. But I don't think anybody besides me wanted to see it, unfortunately. I want to, I would go see it as sort of ironic. Like Day After Tomorrow, I saw ironically. It's like, hey, let's go have fun and make fun of this film because it's so stupid and have a good time. People did not do that with Geostorm. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4 this weekend was Happy Death Day from Universal and Blumhouse. $5 million, a great 45% drop for a horror film. Obviously, it's mostly because of Halloween. It added 237 theaters this weekend, also because of Halloween. Per theater average was just about $1,500 for the weekend. Total take so far is $48.4 million. Not bad on a $4.8 million production budget. This is in its third weekend, Happy Death Day. I think, like I mentioned before, Happy Death Day, because it popped off so well, I think took a lot of Jigsaw's sort of audience away. And maybe even a little bit of Butu's audience. I think the younger people went to see Happy Death Day a couple of weeks ago. They didn't really see a need to go see Jigsaw, right? I think that's essentially what happened. And the only other thing I'll say about Happy Death Day is another win for Blumhouse. They have their horror movie factory going over there. They'll Go Down is probably, and this is like the year of horror too, and I think they're one of the pioneers. I think that company, Blumhouse Productions, will go down as like kind of a legendary horror company now. Like they have just figured out a way to make really, really good. I saw Happy Death Day. It, for $5 million, Get Out was the same thing. $5 million. It seemed like a feature film. It didn't, compare that to sort of like Boo 1 or Boo 2, which were shot for a lot more money, that looked totally trashy, like a Lifetime movie. How Blumhouse can do that on like a budget that's 1/3 or less is really the genius there, right? Like they understand how to make high level polished features for very little money that can be popular. Not all of them are winners. Like they do a lot of films. But the one thing that Jason Blum had said on Bill Simmons' podcast, really fascinating podcast, go listen to the episode. One thing he said is we only want to do things that are unique, right? And they want to only produce scripts where when they read it, they're like, I've never read anything like that before. I think you see that Happy Death Day, where it's like, sure, it like plays off a lot of tropes, but when you see it, it's not like a normal slasher film at all. It's sort of a mixture of like, it feels like, obviously Groundhog Day and like Halloween and Scream, and they're all sort of mixed up there in an interesting way. And they just figured out this formula, make a really unique horror film with a big hook to it for super low budget, but make it polished so that it does feel like a big Hollywood film, and you're basically printing money at that point. So a big win for Happy Death Day in Universal and their partnership with Blumhouse on distributing that film. Number 5 was Blade Runner 2049, 46% drop, made $4 million this weekend. Lost about 780 theaters, still in about 2,400 theaters. Per theater average was $1,600. Total gross so far is 81 million bucks. Production budget on this was 150. It's made 80 million bucks in its fourth weekend. There's not much more I can say about Blade Runner. It is just a massive, massive flop for Warner Brothers, and honestly for everybody involved. The director Denny, it's like, I thought that I think a lot of people thought that this was going to be a big blockbuster, and obviously with that production budget, so did the production company. The fact that it failed so badly, it has massive implications for the industry, just massive. And I talked about them a couple of podcasts ago, but looking at it now, it's just, on top of all the financial losses that will happen, I think culturally within the industry, because so many people are getting burned, it's really, really going to hurt those sort of grandiose sci-fi films, and maybe even just grandiose sort of films that aren't based on comic books. It's gonna hurt them because like they went out on a limb here and the limb broke and everybody fell down and broke their legs. Essentially is what happened. And they don't want to do that again. But enough about Blade Runner. I've talked about it a lot. Number 6 this weekend was Thank You for Your Service, a new wide release was in about 2,000 theaters. Weekend gross was 3.7 million. Per theater average was $1,800 in its opening weekend, which is terrible. Mendoza line for wide releases is 2,000 about. That's sort of the socially agreed upon per theater average ratio or rate, I guess you would say. If it's below that, then you got problems. If you're below that at opening weekend, something terrible happened, essentially. Something did not connect at all. Let's take a look at what Deadline said for this one, because they had some pretty interesting numbers for Thank You for Your Service. I mean, there's a couple issues here. Like cinema score, A-. So the people that did see it, when there weren't many, enjoyed it. They thought it was good. Let's see what they have for 77% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it was fresh. It was a decent movie. The turnout for Thank You for Your Service was 57% male. So skewed male. 39% was over 50 and 74% was over 25. So this was definitely a film that skewed much older than your average wide release. The advertising for this film was focused mostly in military areas. So down by me in Tennessee, I feel like every other person is in the military here. So it was definitely highly marketed here. I think they were trying to ride on the success of American Sniper. And I think American Sniper was probably one of the most successful and interesting box office runs of the last, I guess, decade or so. It opened limited and just took off and made an insane and enormous amount of money. And so I am surprised there hasn't been more war films coming out about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. But there's a couple issues, right? And they bring them up. Deadline brings them up here. It's a hard war to put on screen. In a way, and I mentioned this last weekend, with the Vietnam War, which was an engagement that essentially lasted not even 10 years. We really escalated there, 66? We're kind of de-escalated by 72. So you're talking like 7-8 years, essentially, of real significant fighting going on. We have been at war with Afghanistan, we're not at war with Afghanistan. Afghanistan's not an actual nation state. So we're not at war with a nation state. I guess we're quote unquote fighting terrorists over there, whatever the fuck that means. 15 years now. It's been 15 years. We went to war with Afghanistan and tried to attack the Taliban or whatever and blew them apart 1,000 times over. We've been doing that for 15 years straight. We've been in Iraq for, I guess, 14 years now. We went in there in March 2003. So these are, in some cases, have gone double the Vietnam War in terms of length. Now, look, it's not as a severe of a conflict. Like, we lost 60,000 men, essentially, men and women in Vietnam. A lot of injured and casualties as well, but deaths was about 60,000. No, we're not even near that now. We're not even close to that now, and that's with 2 wars going on. I think those conflicts that we're in now are even more difficult to put on screen than Vietnam. The Vietnam War movies that we all know, Apocalypse Now, Platoon, Deer Hunter, they came out, kind of right after Saigon had fallen. Within about, Platoon was in the 80s, but Apocalypse Now and Deer Hunter were mid to late 70s. So kind of a few years after the war was officially over. With this war, there's no officially over, right? We toppled Saddam Hussein in Iraq basically instantaneously, and we've still been there for 14 years. In Afghanistan, there's no end, right? That's kind of like the morass of that war, is there's no end to it. So if we have these wars that are perpetual, there's no real way for people to distance themselves from it. And that distance is what is required, I think, sometimes to make good art, is that you can't be mired in this conflict and create a great piece of literature or art about it just because it's too close. There has to be some distance there. And that's what we're seeing with this movie, is like, who wants to go see a movie about post-traumatic stress disorder and the Iraq war when people are living it every day? It's like, I know some people in the military and sort of have struggled with issues like this. And like, why would you want to go see a movie about it? Maybe to get your voice out there and to be heard. But I don't know. I feel like it's playing to a very niche audience. Doesn't the average person want to go see this? Hell no. Number one, they don't want to see a movie about the Iraq war. They just don't want to, unless it's like something like super patriotic and basically propaganda, like American Sniper, which this wasn't, because this is darker. And they certainly don't want to see a movie about mental illness. Right. And so it's like a mixture of all these super negative topics that will never play well with the mass audience. Maybe in 10 years after we're out of these countries, you can make a movie like this and people will go see it and be like, oh, that's what happened. And that's what people felt like. You can't do it now. It just doesn't work. Or they're not doing it right. That's another issue too. It's the trailers to this and stuff just felt like very maudlin, if that's the correct term. I use terms incorrectly and mispronounce things constantly, as you probably are aware. It seems so much of a downer, and not even an interesting downer, just kind of a downer. And I don't know. I just there was no audience for this, and they basically didn't see it. And it's one of the worst wide openers performances I've seen in a while. $1,800 per theater. Come on. But it's not the worst. We'll get to that. So Thank You for Your Service is a flop. It's going nowhere, which I think is unfortunate. Despite all the negative things I just said, I think the topic is interesting and there's a lot there to process. I just think it's maybe too soon, and you have to do it in the exact right way. The reason American Sniper did so well is that it was a rah-rah cheerleader movie. Hey, look at what we're doing. A lot of it was bullshit lies, without a doubt. The way that they viewed and depicted the people in that movie, like, just was disgusting to me. But you know what? Audiences and Americans, Trump voters especially, loved it because it made them feel good about being whoever they are and supporting the war and all that kind of crap. Thank You for Your Service does not do that at all, unfortunately. And so not a good performance for that at all. But maybe in like 5 or 6 years, we'll get like an Iraq-Afghan war movie that really connects with people, that isn't bullshit propaganda like American Sniper was. Okay, moving on. Number 7 this weekend was Only the Brave, 3.4 million. Great 42% drop, but per 30 average is 1,300. Total take so far in its second weekend is just shy of 12 million. This one underperformed. It should have performed a lot better. Critics loved it. Audiences loved it as well. Sony fucked up the marketing is what it comes down to. Sure, you had the wildfires going on in California, so a lot of people, like I was just saying with the Iraq war stuff, sometimes stuff is way too close to home for people to want to see it on the screen. That's probably the case for people in California, but they're not their entire country. Like they should be making easily 30-40 million, no problem, and it's not it's not going to do that. It really underperformed, and I think the most of the blame can be laid on Sony with its not great marketing campaign. Number 8 this weekend was The Foreigner, still sticking around. God, I feel like The Foreigner came out like 6 months ago when it was only 3 weeks ago. 3.2 million, great drop, 44% drop. Only lost about 10 theaters. Per theater average was just about $1,300. Total take so far for The Foreigner is 29 million. In terms of overall performance, I think it did okay. I don't think STX really cared that much about how it was going to do in the United States. It felt more like a film that was focused on a Chinese audience or overseas audience. I think it's just a kind of middling performance in the United States, but I think that's all cherry on top for STX, because I think they made up most of their money on the international markets for this one. Number 9, Suburbicon, a new movie. We talked about this one last week a little bit, and I kind of ranted about it a bit. Like I didn't understand what it was about or what it was doing, and I think audiences agreed with me. So this was the George Clooney directed movie, starring Matt Damon, released from Paramount. Only did 2.8 million this weekend, and this was in just over 2,000 theaters. Per theater average opening weekend was $1,370. So that's terrible. Absolutely terrible, train wreck. One of the worst wide release openers this year. And it's clear to see why. Cinema score overall was a D-. D- in cinema score is very rare. Obviously, F is a little bit more rare. There's only been like 12, 13 films or something since they've been doing this. D- is just a terrible, terrible rating. Deadline had a little bit more information about what happened here. So who went to go see Suburbicon? Cinema score shows 55% men, so it's skewed a little bit towards men. 54% were over 50, so it's skewed older. That group of people, so Cinema Score actually breaks down their ratings or their grades per demographic. So the people over 50, they did the whole Cinema Score survey. They gave it a solid F, right? So that's a big deal. So that big group of people who wanted to go see it, they absolutely hated the film. So an F on Cinema Score is not disliking. An F is revulsion. An F is objection. An F is I am disgusted by this film. It is a very visceral reaction. Like you're not a C is sort of like I hated it, and I'm pretty strong. I hated it. An F is just sort of like this film was awful. I feel cheated. I feel wronged in a way. That's why people give a film an F on Cinema Score. D-. Got a D- from people over 25 overall, which was 90% of the audience. This definitely an older film. Females were only at 45% of the audience. Skewed male, skewed older. That older demo gave it an F. People between 25 and 50 essentially saved it from the F score and gave it a D-. So what happened here? Right, like this is a fascinating one that I would love to dive a little bit deeper into. Rotten Tomato score is 26%. It's strange. 141 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, so a lot of critics saw this coming out of. So essentially, the path for this film, right? I've been following it since the first trailer dropped. Actually, way before that, because when it was announced, I invested in it in Hollywood Stock Exchange. My thought process was Matt Damon, Julianne Moore, Oscar Isaac. Amazing cast. George Clooney obviously is a wonderful actor, very powerful person in Hollywood. Directing wise, he's had some successes, a lot of failures, but I think he has sort of the touch to make a good film. And of course, more than anything, the writers of the script were the Coen brothers, and I'm sure that they probably executive produced this as well. So you have kind of an all-star dream team here making a movie. It seemed, and I thought it was going to be an art film. And I think maybe they tried to make it an art film, but that did not work, right? So coming out of the film festivals, which is where an art film will really get its legs and really sort of get the hype and buzz it needs to open limited and then expand wide from New York and Los Angeles out to bigger other cities, that didn't happen. The buzz from the film festivals was bad. Essentially saying that this is not great. This is not good at all. The early reviews were not good. So I think that they basically had a choice to make. Is like, what do we do with this? It doesn't have any awards contention, not possibility anymore. They can't really release it wide and push it out, or they can't really release it limited and slowly expand it because it's not good enough. So I think they just dumped it into theaters thinking, let's just try and like recoup whatever we can in terms of money from this film. And that didn't work either. It only made $2.8 million. Per theater average was so pathetically low at $13.70. Like, it's just a disaster all around. And you do kind of have to wonder, like, how did this happen? And not who's to blame, but like something just did not connect with somebody somewhere, and this was allowed to move forward and marketed incorrectly and all this kind of stuff. I will say, when I saw the trailer, I was not hyped about it at all. It seemed like a Coen Brothers film, but maybe without the charm. You watch any Coen Brothers movie, no matter how dark it is, there's always this sort of winking going on that the Coen Brothers do. Like, they're sort of like, and that's honestly what makes them great directors, is they realize that it's a movie, it's not real life, it's an art performance. And so there's always this sort of layer of very, very mild irony with a lot of their films, which it just makes them great. It adds this little sort of, it's like the difference between a good meal and a fantastic meal. It's those little sort of the seasoning and the little sort of subtle tastes going on. That's essentially why their movies are so great. It's the little tiny touches that they put in there. Suburbicon did not seem to have those touches, at least in the trailer, right? It definitely seemed like the work of somebody else, George Clooney in this case. The genre didn't really make any sense. And this is something that Deadline got out of people from these surveys when they were talking about it. Relish Mix noticed that, quote, potential moviegoers are unsure what ticket they're buying with Suburbicon, for laughs, dark comedy, or political commentary. So the genre just didn't really make any sense, right? Like, I can't tell if I'm supposed to laugh or I'm supposed to be appalled by this, especially, with I don't know, there's a murder in the trailer and they tell you about the murder, and the way that the characters respond or are shown to respond in the trailer just doesn't really add up or make sense. And then the villains that they're showing are almost comedic. It was like the villains are like they're from Home Alone, but the subject matter was like True Detective. It just like didn't really jive at all. And so I think a lot of people felt that it's actually apparently more of a thriller. So it just totally mismarketed. I think the conception of the film also doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why are you making a period piece with Matt Damon about loan sharks? And then apparently there's a lot of political commentary in there. Just a totally failed attempt. I hear the tone makes zero sense based on the critics are saying. So a huge failure, I think, for George Clooney. Matt Damon's going to be unscathed. Coen Brothers are going to be unscathed. It's more an issue for George Clooney as a director than anything. It's not going to make any money. It's going to lose money. And so that's that. I mean, Suburbicon's a failure. And it's too bad, just because you see that group of people working together, and, despite the fact that they have power and stuff, it's not easy to get a movie made. It's just not. And this is the point I'm trying to go back with. I was trying to make with Tyler Perry. Like, getting a movie made through a studio is super, super tough. And there's a lot of things that have to come together to make it happen. And if you take that opportunity and you fail, that's why the studio system is so competitive and vicious in some ways. Like, if you fail and they give you an opportunity, you fail, they might not ever give you another chance. Now, George Clooney is George Clooney. Like, he's got enough money and clout to sort of get a couple more chances, but it's going to hurt him. It's like the next time he goes into a pitch meeting about a movie he wants to do, they're probably going to say no, because it's, look at Suburbicon. You fucked that up. Who says you're not going to fuck this up too? And you had a script from the Coen Brothers, and you let this happen and made this really terrible product. So that's just one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at these performances. There's a lot of context to them and repercussions to a poor performance and a great performance. Okay, so that was number 9. Number 10 was It. Wonderful 28% drop. Just wonderful. I mean, I could gush about this film. I didn't even like the film that much, but its performance is just so awesome. Just shy of $1,000 per theater this weekend. Total take so far for it is $323 million. That all on a $35 million production budget. So it's the story of the fall. It's the story, I think the biggest story probably since Wonder Woman, the box office. It's been crushing. It's the biggest horror film of all time. I think the sequel will probably be out next year. I would hope, fingers crossed, that they could get it done by next year and sort of capitalize on this performance. But just a huge win for it. And, really the film of the fall. And, okay, so that's the top 10. Anything outside the top 10 worth talking about? Sure. Blake Lively opened up a new movie. Apparently this one was screened at the festivals. She plays a blind woman. It's called All I See Is You. They couldn't find a distributor for it because I don't think it's good. Open Road Films basically took it on. I don't know how that works. They're kind of owned by theaters, I guess. So like maybe there wasn't really a fee for this. I don't know how it works. Open on 283 screens, super small opening, did $479 per theater. That's got to be one of the lowest per theater averages of all time. It has to be. What a disaster. Blake Lively is the strangest actress in terms of her career. I don't know quality wise how good she is. I've seen her in a few movies. She seems to be all right. She doesn't seem to be terrible. Obviously, she's a beautiful woman, so like they like to put her on screen or whatever, and she kind of like fills up the screen with her sort of visual beauty, right? But like her acting chops and her emotional range, I don't know if it's really there. The reason why I say that or bring that up is she tends to do these smaller films that require the main character to have a ton of range. She is more, to me, she reminds me more of like an actress, like a big name actress from like the 40s or 50s, where they create movies kind of around her. And they're not really all about sort of small, intimate, sort of very emotional narratives, right? But she did Age Adeline, which I've seen a couple of times because it's always on Epix or whatever. She's not great in it. She's just not good. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why that film failed dramatically. The film went nowhere. I think it felt like it premiered on VOD, which this All I See Is You probably should have premiered on VOD because it's not good. It's Mark Foster again. What is her deal with Mark? How do I know him? Oh my God, Mark Foster did World War Z. How did I forget him? He did Quantum of Solace. He did Stranger Than Fiction. Great movie. Really good movie. He got to start with Monsters Ball. Man, I feel like what happened with this guy? Let's take a look at him for just 1 second and to see what's going on with him. So Mark Foster started out with Monsters Ball, huge breakout film. Oscars were thrown at that movie, right? Just huge. Halle Berry, Billy Bob Thornton. Finding Neverland, I felt like that was decently had a decent reception. Stay, I don't remember at all. This is in 2005. What the hell is this? Ewan McGregor, Naomi Watts, Ryan Gosling. Horror movie? I'm a huge horror fan. I don't remember that at all. Stranger Than Fiction, I think, is a great movie. It came out in 2006. Did The Kite Runner. I'm surprised that did not do more because it was a massive book. Only did 15 million total. He did Quantum of Solace, so he got a huge gig doing the Bond movie. That opened at 67, closed out at 168. So a huge movie for him. That's his biggest movie, right? Although I'm looking at that now, I don't really follow the Bond series that much. But production budget was 200 million. It did 168 domestically, did 586 total. Let me run the math on this real quick because this might tell us why he's doing these trash films now. So Quantum of Solace came out in 2008. Did 586 million worldwide. I know just from doing this stuff for a while, probably 87% of that was worldwide revenue. So probably made about $500 million in revenue on all platforms in all regions, entire worldwide. About $500 million in profit. In revenue. $200 million production budget, honestly, is going to be about 3x that total releasing costs worldwide. That's on every platform, all regions, streaming, VOD, TV, you name it. Ooh. So that's why, right? $200 million production budget, massive marketing campaign. You're looking at releasing costs north of $500 million. So this one probably at best broke even, but my guess is maybe lost some cash, which I didn't realize because I haven't looked at that film in a long time. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my numbers are way off, but I don't see how they released it for anything under $500 million. There's no way. And I know that worldwide box office didn't probably get them more than $500 million in total revenue. So he has been, so that was a little bit of a failure for him. Did a smaller film called Machine Gun Preacher that came out in 2011. And then they did World War Z, which I think was a huge win, wasn't it? $540 million. No, kind of a similar performance now that I'm looking at it to Quantum of Solace. Same production budget, basically same worldwide gross. They are doing a sequel, so they must have made money off of it. Who knows though? Maybe I'm just completely full of shit. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just using Deadline's numbers, so maybe they're wrong. But he puts out this All I See Is You with Blake Lively, and total disaster. Why release it all? Just put it on Netflix and say it's over. It didn't really do very well. Same thing with Age of Adeline. Just like throw it up on VOD and streaming and just say it's over and done with. It was not successful. Move on. Don't release it in theaters. There's no point. Okay, so enough about that. That's limited releases. Other limited releases, anything that pops out to me. Florida Project expanded a little bit, doing about 3,700 per theater. Did not break out like I thought it was going to. Goodbye Christopher Robin expanded a little bit. Terrible per theater average, 1,500, going nowhere. Battle of Sexes going nowhere. Total so far is 12 million. Killing of Sacred Deer, that's a really big buzzy film. Added 29 theaters, did about 6,700 per theater. Not terrible, but not good. So that's going to go nowhere either. The whole point I'm trying to make here is that there's not really a lot of limited films that are breaking out. The only one that did decently well was Victoria and Abdul, which only dropped 24% this weekend. Still in 1,000 theaters, doing about 1,500 per theater. 6 weekends, did about $17 million so far. Kind of a tiny breakout, not a huge breakout. But $17 million for that kind of movie is pretty good, I would think. Oh my God, The Snowman. I didn't even look at The Snowman. The Snowman, which opened last weekend, it dropped 65%. It's 16th this weekend in its second weekend. 65% drop, 1.2 million. Total take so far is 5.7 million. Now that is what you call a massive, massive flop. Any other big drops like that I'm seeing? No, not really. Anything else that's out there? Anything added a lot, lost a lot? Mountains Between Us is essentially done. Lost 1,000 theaters. It's going to end up probably low 30s, which is not terrible for that. I think they want to do a lot more than that. Okay, I think that is mostly it. Let's talk a little bit. Whoa. Let's pump the brakes here. I'm looking at the end of the bottom of the list. There's 56 films listed on Box Office Mojo for this weekend. Number 55 is Amityville: The Awakening, which a film that I have heard about that has been on the shelf, I believe, for 2 years. It was finished 2 years ago and ready to go. But they never released it. But apparently they released it this weekend on 10 theaters. It did, I'm not joking, it did $74 per theater over the weekend. That's right, 74. It made $742. Let's do a little bit of math here. So $74 per theater, right? So let's take a look how many showings it probably did. I'm just guessing here. Probably 4 showings at least per day, times 3 days. You're looking at 12 showings total. $74 divided by 12 showings. It made $6 per showing. Average ticket cost is $9. So less than one person went to that movie per showing per theater. I mean, obviously they're just dumping the movie out there. I don't know why. There probably was, my guess is that a contract obligation to put it out in theaters, but like they can sort of skirt that by just dumping it for one weekend at like a couple theaters. That's probably what happens here. Maybe they're trying to get some of the Halloween money from this week. Who knows? But the movie finally came out after 2 years and had one of the worst openings in the history of film. But again, it's probably just a contractual dump more than anything. It wasn't a real opening. Okay, so that was this weekend. Let's talk just briefly about what's coming up. Well, I like to do a little holistic step back a bit. Like, what happened this weekend? What are the big stories from this week? What are the big takeaways? I think the thing that I'm seeing is that it was a pretty busy Halloween season this year. I think Happy Death Day is the winner. I think Boo2 underperformed and Jigsaw underperformed. Jigsaw underperformed pretty severely, I think. And so I think Happy Death Day is sort of the winner. Blumhouse keeps the crown of the best horror film studio out there today and most successful. But obviously, in terms of horror overall, it is the ultimate winner for this year and forever for right now. And horror's had a big comeback in the last couple of years, and Rotten Tomatoes even has a little article about it up on their homepage right now if you want to check it out. Horror films are back. It's going through a renaissance. It started out, to me, it started out with It Follows. It Follows, The Witch, and then Get Out. To me, are the three sort of pillars of this horror renaissance that's been going on. And I think It and Happy Death Day have been supported by those sort of breakout films that were more arty, especially It and The Witch were more art films. But they really rewrote sort of the rules, I think, for modern horror and contemporary horror. And now they're seeing the dividends of that with these massive breakout movies like It and Get Out and Split. So that's sort of the big thing, is that Happy Death Day, I think, is to me is like the biggest victory here for the Halloween season. And we're continuing to see, and I brought this up last week as well, limited films are just not playing. I don't know what's going on. I think that we're starting to see a massive shift in the industry, and it's almost as if the most susceptible films are getting affected first, and that would be limited sort of art released films. There's no place for them in the movie theaters anymore. I'm sorry, but it's true. Like, there's no place for Sacred Deer, The Killing of Sacred Deer, in a movie theater. Like, there's not. Like, go see, maybe in New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and San Francisco, and that's it. Like, maybe one art house will play it like for a couple of weeks, but like, put it on Netflix, put it on Amazon, and just call it a day. Like, you're not going to make any real money off of it. And those are the canaries in the coal mine to me. If there's no more place for those films, that sort of virus or disease or rot in the industry will it's almost as if you had an infection in your toe, and it'll work its way up if you don't find a cure, right? And it's going to go from low tier films to mid tier films. And eventually maybe it never will affect the huge blockbuster films, but I think that it will. And maybe Blade Runner is an example of that. So, kind of a quieter weekend overall, but a lot of fascinating stories to come out of it. And I think, the biggest winner, I think, overall so far, this is going to be Happy Death Day, and the biggest loser is going to be Geostorm. Just complete another debacle. Geostorm and Blade Runner are just awful performances. Okay. That's sort of the holistic take for the week. Let's take a look a little bit at next weekend. Halloween's on Tuesday this week, so that may Tuesday, and it's low ticket price day on Tuesday, so probably see a big day for that for the horror films. What else is going on? Next week is the start of the holiday movie season. We made it, folks. We got through fall. Fall's over now. When Thor hits theaters on Thursday night, that is the start of the holiday movie season, and will last all the way through probably the first week of January. So a whole different ball game going into this weekend. What is Thor going to do? I'll do a whole preview show on Thor without a doubt in the middle of the week, probably Wednesday night. I'll post it. Who knows? I don't know. The tracking has been going up. Tracking started out 90 to 100. The most recent tracking, I believe, was pushing 110, almost up to 125 now. So it's now tracking higher than Justice League, which is surprising a lot of people online. Doesn't surprise me at all. Thor has better marketing by a mile. The marketing for this new Thor movie has been phenomenal. I mean, it makes me even want to see it. I don't even like comic book movies. I was like, this looks like fun. It's kind of stupid, but like really colorful, fun stuff that you'd want to see on a big screen. So great marketing. We'll see. I'll do a deep dive on it later this week. I don't know. I think that it might underperform tracking. I don't know. It's been super quiet the last couple of weeks. Nothing's really broken out since it. So maybe people are clamoring for a film. I don't see how Thor's going to play to the over 25 audience though. And like the over 50 audience isn't going to show up at all. So you completely lost that demo. The 25 to 50, I don't think it's going to pop off that much. So you're betting mostly on the under 25 and under demo for this, which is possible. Who knows? So that's coming out. Any sort of limited releases worth mentioning? Even though I just stated that limited release films are over. I think they are, to be honest with you. Lady Bird is coming out on A24. That should have a ton of Oscar buzz behind it. LBJ with Woody Harrelson is coming out as well, limited. Nothing else really too massive to talk about. I can't tell. I guess Bad Moms Christmas is coming out on this Wednesday on STX 3500 theaters. Massive release. Yeah, it's coming out November 1st. I don't know what the hell they're thinking at STX. It doesn't make any sense to release this film this week. 0 cents. Who wants to see a Christmas movie on All Saints Day, the day after Halloween? Like, what are you thinking? I have no idea how it's going to do. I don't even know how to guess how it's going to do. A mid-release opening like this. Sure, you want to be first, right? You want to be first to the whole Christmas rush, but there's being too early. And this is way too early. Maybe the week before Thanksgiving, you could pop this out and you could do okay all the way through Christmas and New Year's, but like way too late for Bad Moms Christmas. I don't know what they're thinking. And then so after, we're getting pretty busy in November. You got Thor coming out. You got Bad Moms coming out Wednesday. Thor coming out Thursday night, technically. Then the week after, in November, November 10th, Daddy's Home 2, which will be huge. That'll be absolutely massive. Murder on Orient Express. Not really sure how that one's going to play out. Has an amazing cast. Will play very well with the over 50 crowd. I'm not sure how under 50, under 40, how well it's going to do. Then you have Justice League. Justice League comes out November 17th. That's looking like at least 100, 120, $130 million opening. And then we're into Thanksgiving. Coco comes out, and then Dimension horror film Polaroid, which I thought was supposed to come out on Christmas, but maybe not. And then you're getting into Star Wars territory. Although, like, I will say this, the early December is completely empty besides limited release films. Shape of Water, Disaster Artist, Wonder Wheel, that stuff's coming out limited in early December, but it's pretty much a wide open runway for Star Wars to take over in mid-December. In any event, that's all I got for this week, guys, or this weekend. I will do a Thor preview show, probably Wednesday night, maybe Thursday night. I might do Thursday to get the Bad Moms Christmas numbers in, just to see how it did and talk about that a bit. But I'll definitely do a preview show, and then I'll be back next weekend for a weekend review. Thanks for listening. This has been the Wildline Podcast.